Ladies and gentlemen, I first want to salute the extraordinary courage of these two young women, because it's obvious that testifying like this is on one hand extremely difficult, but it's also extremely necessary, because any process of accountability, any kind of legal or other proceedings to hold the people who did this and are still doing this every day, any process to hold them accountable can only start by the testimony of victims. It is because the victims have the courage to stand up and to say what happened to them that we have the possibility and the responsibility to organize a process in which those who did this can be held accountable. Without the victims, any attempt to organize accountability is vain. It's obvious from what we saw and what we know that Daesh, driven not by religion, but by a fascist political ideology inspired by Wahhabism, it's clear that inspired by this criminal ideology of exclusion, this hate ideology, it's clear that Daesh has committed not only war crimes, crimes against humanity, but also crimes of genocide. The Convention on the Prevention and the Punishment of the Crime of Genocide defines genocide as an act with the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial or religious group, as such by killing the members of the group or by causing serious bodily or mental harm to the members of the group. And from what we heard, there can be no doubt that the crimes we have witnessed and the crimes we heard about are crimes of genocide, committed against the Ezidi people, but also committed against other communities, against, in fact, any community who does not share the criminal ideology of Daesh. Christians have been victims of the same ideology. Moderate Sunni Muslims have been victims of this same ideology. Shias have been victims of the same genocidal ideology and campaign. And so I think it is important that the victims stand together and share together this responsibility to hold these people liable for the crimes they commit. There is an obligation upon all members of the international community and upon all of us, an obligation under international law to establish adequate mechanisms, first of all, and to take adequate measures, first of all, to stop this happening, but also to avoid impunity, to prosecute and to punish effectively those who committed those crimes. The Geneva Conventions of 1949, established immediately after the Second World War, when the world was also confronted with the results of a genocide, the Geneva Conventions impose upon all members of the international community an obligation to punish serious violations of the Geneva Conventions. The states are required to search for alleged offenders regardless of their nationality and bring them to their own courts or hand them over for trial to any other party, state party, which has a prima facie case. We know, of course, from our experience that bringing justice and hold people accountable for this type of massive international crimes, crimes against international law, crimes against humanity, genocide, is not an easy thing to do. The primary responsibility at this point is, in principle, on the Iraqi state. Because Iraq, the crimes we heard of today, and we know of more in general, are committed on the territory of the Iraqi state. But we know, of course, that while a state is at war, while a state is waging war against such a criminal gang and a criminal organization, which I think should be ISIS, between brackets, we should as such consider it, I think, as a conspiracy to commit genocide, and anybody participating in this organization as a person participating in a conspiracy to commit genocide. That between brackets, we know that it's not an easy task. And we know that when a state is at war, it is sometimes difficult at the same time to organize judicial processes, collecting the evidence, preparing the files to bring the perpetrators to the justice. We think, therefore, that this should be, while in principle the primary responsibility is on the Iraqi state, we think there should be a shared responsibility of the international community, where the Iraqi authorities and the international community work together to bring the perpetrators of these crimes to justice. And of course, there are a series of mechanisms that are possible. I think the Iraqi national courts should play a role in organizing the repression of these unthinkable crimes. But recent experiences in the international community have shown that there are also some other possibilities. For war crimes and crimes against humanity committed in Cambodia and Sierra Leone, mixed national and international tribunals have been set up, with the advantage, of course, that it helps the local governments by bringing additional capacity from the international community to deal with these crimes through the judicial mechanisms. I think there should be also a particular attention here for another aspect. Some of the perpetrators of these crimes, and we heard about, from the last story we heard, a German national was involved in this. Some of these crimes are committed by nationals from European countries and from other Arab countries. I think there is a special responsibility upon these countries to participate in the effort to bring to justice their own nationals who have been involved in these crimes. And that is perfectly possible. National courts in Europe, of course, have jurisdiction over their own nationals committing crimes abroad. A problem is, of course, the collection of evidence. And it's clear that in the collection of evidence, national governments in Europe, national judicial systems in Europe, will have to cooperate with the Iraqi authorities to collect the evidence and to bring it to the judicial processes in Europe. But there is a specific responsibility on those, on the countries who provide tens, dozens of these criminals. There's a particular responsibility on these countries to participate in the effort to bring them to justice. Some European countries also have so-called universal jurisdiction mechanisms, which give them jurisdiction not only over the crimes committed by their own nationals, but also over a broader spectrum of war crimes, crimes against humanity. The difficulty is, without any doubt, that the criteria in each country are different, the criteria, and that, of course, you need some kind of geographical link to the country where a case will be tried. But we know also that members of the Ezidi community are living in Europe, that they are victims through their relatives being killed, through their property being destroyed, through their relatives being under torture. So there are possibilities there also for the European countries to help the Iraqi authorities in establishing mechanisms of justice and accountability for these crimes. And finally, of course, there is the International Criminal Court. I must say that I'm rather pessimistic about the possibility for the International Criminal Court to deal with this for a series of reasons. One is, of course, that it's a highly political. I think we have to start it immediately. And I would like to make two suggestions in order to try to start this process. I think the Iraqi authorities should very quickly, as quickly as possible, outline a plan to prosecute and to punish the most serious international crimes committed by Daesh on their territory. An Iraqi commission with the participation of international experts should draft, I think, a plan, a global plan, in which all the mechanisms that are available are made to work together in order to organize real accountability, which will certainly include Iraqi courts, but also international legal cooperation with the courts and the police forces and the prosecution of the European countries from which some of the perpetrators originate. I think as quickly as such a plan is established, legislation should be passed to make it possible to create additional judicial mechanisms and to lay down the rules for the division of work and the interaction of all these mechanisms. And secondly, I think it's very important that in the meanwhile, all those who participate on the ground in the collection of the evidence of the crimes that have been committed should receive additional training on the standards of evidence collection applicable in all these possible venues where cases could be brought. Because unfortunately, the standards of evidence are sometimes different. And so it's important to see now, to collect now on the ground when the evidence is still fresh, I would say. It's important to collect it completely and to pay attention to the possibilities to bring these cases, for example, also to European courts. This morning, and I will conclude on that, this morning when we discussed in the car with the last victim who spoke, she explained, for example, as she did to you, that one of the last people who bought her and who raped her and who committed violence against her was a German. It is very important to collect that evidence now, to share it with the German authorities, and to put them in front of their responsibilities. With the information I heard this morning on this German criminal, I think it should be without any problem possible for the German authorities to identify this person, even if she didn't know exactly the name, but she knew enough to allow the German authorities to identify this man. Well, this information should be collected now in Iraq, transferred to the German authorities, so that we all can put the German authorities also, the German, the Belgian, the French authorities also before their responsibilities to punish these terrible crimes which we heard of today. It's our common responsibility to work for this. It's the responsibility of all members of the international community to bring these people to court and to punish them for what they did.